Jack Morrison stood at the window of his laboratory. Watching the morning sun rise over the Pacific Ocean, the Earth Defense Research Center buzzed with activity below him. Scientists hurried between buildings, carrying datapads and sample containers. Military officers walked alongside them, their uniforms crisp and their faces serious. Jack had worked at this place for 12 years. He had started as a young scientist fresh from university, eager to study alien life forms. Now he was 35 years old and one of the most respected xenobiologists on Earth. His research had helped humanity understand dozens of alien species. His work had saved countless lives, but today would be different. Today would change everything. Dr. Lisa Grant knocked on his door and entered without waiting for an answer. She was his research partner and had been his friend for 8 years. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her brown eyes looked worried. "Jack, the council meeting is in 1 hour," she said. "Are you ready?" Jack turned away from the window. On his desk lay a thick file marked with red stamps. The words "Top Secret" and "Classified" covered the folder. Inside were 3 years of research that could change how humans and aliens live together. "I'm ready," Jack said. "But I don't think they're going to like what I have to say." Lisa sat down in the chair across from his desk. "Jack, you know how important this is. The military has been waiting for your report on the Kepler 442b mission. They want to know about the alien technology you found." Jack picked up the file. "They want to know how to use it as a weapon." "That's not what I found out there, Lisa." "What do you mean?" Jack opened the file and pulled out a photograph. It showed a beautiful crystalline structure that seemed to glow with its own light. The crystal was about the size of a human head and had a complex pattern of lines running through it. "This is a Zephyrian," Jack said. "It's not just a crystal. It's alive, it's intelligent. It can think and feel just like we can." Lisa leaned forward to look at the photograph. "You're saying this rock is alive?" "It's not a rock, it's a living being. The Zephyrians have been on Kepler 442b for thousands of years. They're peaceful, they don't want to fight anyone. They just want to live in harmony with their environment." But the energy readings we detected," Lisa said. "The power source that could revolutionize our technology." "That's how they live," Jack explained. "They don't use technology like we do. They are the technology. They can manipulate energy with their minds. They can heal themselves and others. They can even communicate across great distances without any machines." Lisa stood up and walked to the window. "Jack, you know what the military wants? They want weapons. They want shields. They want power sources for our ships." "I know what they want," Jack said. "But I won't give it to them. The Zephyrians are not animals to be studied and used. They're people, they have families and culture and history. They deserve respect. The council won't see it that way." Jack closed the file, "Then I'll have to make them see it." An hour later, Jack walked into the council chamber. The room was large and cold, with a high ceiling and no windows. 12 people sat at a curved table facing him. General Patricia Kane sat in the center, her silver hair pulled back and her blue eyes hard as ice. She had been fighting aliens for 20 years and had no patience for scientists who got in her way. Double quotes, "Dr. Morrison," General Kane said. "Please, present your findings from the Kepler 442b expedition." Jack stood at a podium in the center of the room. A large screen behind him showed the seal of the United Earth Council. He looked at each council member before speaking. "3 months ago, I led a team to Kepler 442b, he began. "We were sent to investigate energy readings that suggested advanced alien technology. What we found was much more important than technology." He pressed a button on the podium. The screen behind him changed to show the photograph of the Zephyrian crystal. "We found a species called the Zephyrians. They are intelligent, peaceful beings who have lived on Kepler 442b for thousands of years. They don't build machines or weapons. Instead, they have evolved to work with energy directly." General Kane leaned forward. "Dr. Morrison, we're not interested in alien sociology. We need to know about their technology and how we can use it." "That's exactly the problem," Jack said. You're thinking about this wrong. The Zephyrians don't have technology in the way. We understand it. They are living beings who have learned to manipulate energy through biological processes. You can't just take their abilities and put them in a machine. Then how do we benefit from this discovery? Asked Dr. Richard Blake, the head of the Weapons Development Program. Jack pressed another button. The screen showed a video of him standing next to a group of Zephyrian crystals. In the video, the crystals were glowing softly and Jack was holding his hands out toward them. The only way to understand their abilities is to work with them, Jack said, to learn from them, to form partnerships. They're willing to share their knowledge, but only if we approach them with respect and peaceful intentions. Partnerships? General Kane's voice was sharp. Dr. Morrison, we are at war with half a dozen alien species. We don't have time for partnerships. We need weapons and we need them now. But what if we didn't have to fight? Jack asked. What if we could find peaceful solutions to our conflicts? The Zephyrians have knowledge that could help us understand other species better. They could help us find ways to live together instead of destroying each other. The room fell silent. Jack could see the council members exchanging glances. Some looked interested, but others looked angry. Dr. Sarah Kim, the head of the research division, spoke up. Dr. Morrison, this is very interesting from a scientific perspective, but the council needs practical applications. Can you show us how to harness their energy manipulation abilities? Jack felt his heart sink. I can't do that. The Zephyrians shared their knowledge with me because they trusted me. They believed I would use it to help both our species. If I give you what you want, you'll turn it into a weapon. That's not your decision to make, General Kane said. You work for the Earth Defense Council. Your job is to provide us with the information we need to protect humanity. My job is to study alien life forms and help humanity understand them, Jack replied. The Zephyrians are not enemies. They're potential allies. They could teach us things that would benefit all of humanity. Where are they? Asked Colonel Dan Murphy, the military liaison. We need the coordinates of their homeworld. Jack shook his head. I won't give you that information. The room erupted in angry voices. General Kane slammed her hand on the table. Dr. Morrison, you are ordered to provide the coordinates of the Zephyrian homeworld immediately. I refuse. Then you are in violation of your oath as a member of the Earth Defense Council. You swore to put humanity's interests above all else. Jack looked around the room at the faces of people he had worked with for years. Some looked disappointed. Others looked angry. A few looked sad. I am putting humanity's interests first, he said quietly. But I'm thinking about our future, not just our present. If we approach the Zephyrians with violence, we'll lose the chance to learn from them. We'll lose the chance to become something better than we are now. General Kane stood up. Dr. Morrison, you are relieved of your duties. Security will escort you from the building. You are forbidden from contacting any alien species without authorization from this council. 2 security guards stepped forward. Jack looked at Lisa, hoping to see support in her eyes. Instead, she looked away as the guards led him toward the door. Jack heard General Kane speak to the remaining council members. We'll find the Zephyrians without Dr. Morrison's help, she said. And when we do, we'll take what we need to protect humanity. Jack knew then that he had made the right choice. But he also knew that his life would never be the same. Within hours, news of his refusal would spread throughout the research center. By tomorrow, everyone would know that Jack Morrison had chosen aliens over his own species. He would be called a traitor. And maybe, he thought as the guards led him away, that was exactly what humanity needed. The transport ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of New Haven. Jack Morrison pressed his face against the small window and watched the brown and gray landscape roll by below. The planet looked nothing like Earth. There were no blue oceans or green forest. Just endless stretches of rock and dust broken up by mining operations and small settlements. Jack had been traveling for 3 weeks since leaving Earth. The journey took him through 4 different space stations, each one farther from civilization than the last. At every stop, people recognized his name. Some spat on the ground when they saw him. Others just stared and whispered to their friends. The news had spread quickly. Jack Morrison, the famous scientist who discovered alien life forms, had refused to help his own species. The media called him a coward. They said he cared more about alien rocks than human lives. They said he was a traitor who deserved to be exiled. Jack tried not to think about it. He tried to focus on his new life. But it was hard to ignore the stares and whispers that followed him everywhere he went. The transport ship landed at New Haven's main spaceport. Jack gathered his few belongings and walked down the ramp into the dusty air. The gravity here was lighter than Earth's, making each step feel strange and bouncy. The spaceport was busy with miners and cargo workers. They wore thick clothes and breathing masks to protect themselves from the dust. Jack looked around for someone to meet him, but no one seemed to notice his arrival. "You Morrison?" A gruff voice asked behind him. Jack turned to see a tall man with gray hair and weathered skin. He wore the uniform of a colony administrator, but it was old and faded. "Yes, I'm Jack Morrison. Ben Clark, I run this place." The man looked Jack up and down with cold eyes. "Heard about you on the news. Can't say I'm happy to have you here." "I didn't ask to come here," Jack said. "No, I suppose you didn't." Clark picked up Jack's bag without asking. "Come on. I'll show you where you'll be staying." They walked through the spaceport and into the main colony. New Haven was bigger than Jack had expected. There were about 5,000 people living in connected buildings that formed a rough circle around the central plaza. The buildings were made of gray metal and looked like they had been built quickly and cheaply. "This used to be a research station," Clark explained as they walked, "but the funding dried up 10 years ago. Now it's just a mining colony. We dig up rare metals and ship them back to Earth. It's not pretty work, but it pays the bills." They stopped in front of a small building near the edge of the colony. Clark opened the door and led Jack inside. The apartment was tiny, with just one room that served as bedroom, kitchen, and living area. There was a small bathroom and a window that looked out at the mining operations. "This is home," Clark said. "Rent is 200 credits a month. You'll start work tomorrow morning at the atmospheric processing plant. 6 in the morning, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week." Jack looked around the small apartment. It was nothing like his laboratory on Earth, but it would have to do. "What kind of work?" he asked. "Maintenance, mostly. The atmospheric processors keep the air breathable inside the colony. Without them, we'd all be dead in a few hours. It's dangerous work, but someone has to do it." After Clark left, Jack sat on the narrow bed and looked out the window. He could see the mining operations in the distance, with their giant machines and clouds of dust. This was his new life. This was what happened to people who chose their conscience over their career. The next morning, Jack reported to the atmospheric processing plant. The facility was a maze of pipes and machines that hummed and vibrated constantly. The air was hot and filled with the smell of chemicals and oil. His supervisor was a woman named Carol Davis. She was about 40 years old with short brown hair and tired eyes. She looked at Jack with suspicion when he introduced himself. "So you're the famous traitor," she said. "Well, fame won't help you here. This is real work for real people." Carol showed Jack around the plant. There were dozens of machines that filtered the air, removed toxins, and maintained the right balance of oxygen and nitrogen. Some of the equipment was old and constantly breaking down. Other machines were newer but poorly maintained. "Your job is to crawl through the ventilation shafts and check the air filters," Carol explained. "Some of the shafts are only 3 feet wide. Some are near the reactor cores where the radiation levels are high. It's not pleasant work, but it's important." Jack spent his first day learning the layout of the plant. He crawled through narrow metal tubes, replaced air filters, and checked sensors. The work was hot and dirty, and by the end of the day his clothes were soaked with sweat and covered in dust. When he returned to his apartment, Jack found a note slipped under his door. It was from someone named Helen Brooks, asking him to meet. Her at the colony's medical center. Jack walked through the colony as the artificial lights dimmed to simulate evening. People sat on benches in the central plaza, talking and playing games. Children ran between the buildings, their laughter echoing off the metal walls. It almost felt normal, except for the way people stopped talking when they saw him. The medical center was a small building with clean white walls and bright lights. Jack found Helen Brooks in her office, reading medical reports. She was an elderly woman with white hair and kind eyes. She looked up when Jack entered and smiled. "Dr. Morrison, please sit down. I've been looking forward to meeting you." Jack sat in the chair across from her desk. "You wanted to see me?" "I did. I heard about what happened on Earth. I wanted you to know that not everyone thinks you're a traitor." "You're the first person to say that," Helen laughed. "I'm probably the only person on New Haven who understands what you went through. I was exiled here 15 years ago for similar reasons." "What did you do?" "I refused to work on biological weapons. The military wanted me to develop viruses that would target specific alien species. I said no, and here I am." Jack felt a wave of relief. Finally, someone who understood. "It's not easy being here," Helen continued. "People don't trust us. They think we chose aliens over humans. But sometimes doing the right thing means being misunderstood." Over the following weeks, Jack settled into his new routine. He worked at the atmospheric plant during the day and spent his evenings with Helen, talking about science and philosophy. She was one of the few people who didn't judge him for his choices. The work was hard and dangerous. Jack crawled through radioactive shafts, replaced toxic filters, and repaired equipment that could explode if handled wrong. Several times he nearly died when old machinery malfunctioned. But he kept working because he needed the money and because he had nowhere else to go. The other workers slowly began to accept him. They saw that he wasn't afraid of dangerous work. They saw that he did his job without complaining. Some even began to respect him, though they never said so out loud. But Jack's real work happened in secret. In his small apartment late at night, he continued his research on the Zephyrians. He had memorized their energy patterns and biological structures. He had learned their language and understood their culture. He kept detailed notes hidden in encrypted files the Zephyrians had taught him about energy harmonics and biological resonance. They had shown him how living beings could work with energy instead of against it. They had shared knowledge that could change how humans understood the universe. Jack also monitored the news from Earth. The military was still looking for the Zephyrian homeworld. They had sent ships to dozens of star systems, but found nothing. General Kane appeared on news programs, promising that humanity would find and use alien technology to defend itself, but Jack began to notice other stories in the news. Ships were disappearing in the outer colonies. Entire settlements were going silent. The official reports blamed equipment failures and pirate attacks, but Jack saw patterns that worried him. The energy signatures from the missing ships were strange. They didn't match any known technology, human or alien. Jack had seen similar patterns before in old Zephyrian records. They were signs of something ancient and dangerous. Jack tried to warn Earth authorities, but no one would listen to him. He was just an exiled trader living on a mining colony. Who would believe him? So Jack continued his secret research and waited. He studied the energy patterns and tried to understand what they meant. He prepared for something that he hoped would never come, but deep in his heart, Jack knew that his exile was not the end of his story. The universe was vast and full of mysteries. Humanity was about to face something it had never encountered before, and when that day came, Jack Morrison would be ready. Jack Morrison was deep inside the atmospheric processing plant when the first alarm sounded. He had been crawling through a narrow maintenance shaft for 2 hours, replacing old air filters near the reactor core. The radiation levels were high, and his protective suit was getting hot and uncomfortable. The alarm was different from the usual equipment warnings. This was the colony-wide emergency signal that Jack had never heard before. He quickly crawled back through the shaft and climbed down into the main plant floor. Carol Davis was standing at the control station, her face pale as she watched the screens. Other workers had gathered around her, all talking at once. What's happening? Jack asked. Signal from Earth Command, Terrell said without looking at him. Something big is happening out there. Jack pushed through the crowd to see the main screen. It showed a news broadcast from Earth. The reporter was a young woman with short blonde hair, and she looked frightened. This is Maria Santos reporting from Earth Command Headquarters. We have confirmed reports that the outer colonies of Titan Base and Europa Station have lost all communication. Military ships sent to investigate have also gone silent. General. Kane is expected to make a statement within the hour. The screen changed to show space maps with red X marks over several star systems. Jack counted 12 colonies that had gone dark in the past week. His heart began to race as he recognized the pattern. Turn up the volume, someone shouted, the reporter continued. Early reports suggest that the missing colonies were attacked by an unknown force. Survivors from the merchant vessel Lucky Star described ships unlike anything in our databases. The attackers appeared to be made of some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Jack felt his blood turn cold. He had seen descriptions like this before in ancient Zephyrian records. The Zephyrians had told him stories of the Great War, fought thousands of years ago against entities they called the Harbingers. I need to get to my apartment, Jack said to Carol. You can't leave during an emergency, she replied. This is more important than work, Jack said. Already heading for the door, Jack ran through the colony streets as people poured out of buildings to watch. The news broadcasts on public screens. The artificial sky above New Haven had been changed to show the emergency broadcasts, so everyone could see what was happening. In his apartment, Jack pulled out his hidden research files. He had spent months translating Zephyrian historical records. Most of it was about their culture and biology, but some files contained warnings about ancient enemies. Jack found the file he was looking for and opened it on his small computer. The Zephyrian text was difficult to read, but he had learned their language well enough to understand the basic meaning. The record spoke of machine entities that existed partially outside normal space and time. They were called the Harbingers because they appeared before great changes in the galaxy. The Zephyrians described them as guardians who awakened when aggressive species threatened the balance of life, according to the records. The Harbingers had attacked the Zephyrians' ancient civilization when it became too militaristic. The war had lasted for centuries and nearly destroyed both species. The Zephyrians had survived only by learning to work with energy instead of against it. They had given up their weapons and embraced peaceful coexistence with other life forms. Jack, read the files again, making sure he understood correctly. The Harbingers were not evil. They were programmed to eliminate species that became too dangerous to the rest of the galaxy. They had been sleeping for thousands of years, waiting for the next threat to emerge, and now humanity had awakened them. Jack's door burst open. Helen Brooks stood in the doorway, breathing hard from running. Jack, have you seen the news? I'm watching it now. Helen, I think I know what's happening. Helen sat down next to him as Jack explained what he had learned from the Zephyrian records. Her face grew more worried as he talked. You're saying these things are coming for us because we're too aggressive? That's exactly what I'm saying. Humanity has been expanding through space for 50 years. We've been building bigger weapons and fighting more wars. The Harbingers must have decided we're a threat. They watched the news together as more reports came in. The attacks were getting closer to Earth. The military was mobilizing every ship they had, but early battles were not going well. General Kane appeared on screen for her promised statement. She stood at a podium in front of the Earth Defense Council building, her uniform perfect and her expression grim. Citizens of Earth and the colonies, she began. We are facing an unprecedented threat from an alien force we have designated as the Harbingers. These entities have attacked 12 of our colonies and destroyed 3 fleet groups. We estimate their numbers in the thousands. The general paused and looked directly into the camera. Make no mistake, this is a war for the survival of humanity. We will use every weapon at our disposal to defend our people and our way of life. We will not surrender and we will not retreat. Jack shook his head. She doesn't understand. Fighting, Them will only make things worse. What do you mean? The Harbingers adapt to whatever weapons you use against them. The more aggressive you are, the stronger they become. The only way to survive is to show them that you're not a threat. Over. The following days, Jack watched in horror as the war unfolded. The Harbingers moved through human space like a plague, destroying everything in their path. They were unlike any enemy humanity had ever faced. The creatures were not solid beings. They existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that humans could not perceive. They could phase through shields and armor as if they were not there. They could appear and disappear at will, making it impossible to track them. Human weapons were useless against them. Laser beams passed through their bodies without effect. Missiles exploded harmlessly around them. Nuclear weapons seemed to make them stronger, as if they fed on the energy, but the worst part was how they learned. Every time humans tried a new tactic, the Harbingers adapted within hours. They seemed to understand human psychology and military strategy better than humans did themselves. The battles were massacres. Entire fleets were destroyed without the Harbingers losing a single ship. Colonies that tried to fight back were completely wiped out. Only a few settlements survived, and those were the ones that surrendered immediately. Jack tried to contact Earth Command to warn them about the Harbingers' true nature, but no one would listen to him. He was still the exiled traitor, who had refused to help humanity. Why would anyone believe him now? The news reports grew more desperate each day. Millions of refugees were fleeing toward Earth as the Harbingers advanced through human space. The military was planning a final stand in the Sol system, using every weapon they had ever built. Jack knew it would be suicide. The Harbingers would adapt to Earth's defenses just as they had adapted to everything else. Humanity would be extinct within weeks, but Jack had an idea. It was dangerous and probably impossible, but it was the only chance he could think of. Late one night, Jack sent an encrypted message to Dr. Lisa Grant on Earth. He knew she was working with the military now, trying to develop new weapons to fight the Harbingers. He also knew she probably hated him for what he had done. The message was simple. Lisa, I know how to stop the Harbingers, but I need your help. The answer is not in weapons or shields. It's in the research you helped me destroy. The Zephyrians knew these creatures. They fought them before and survived. If you want to save humanity, you have to trust me one more time. Jack sent the message and waited. He had no idea if Lisa would even read it, much less respond. But he had to try. The fate of humanity might depend on whether his former partner was willing to listen to the man she had helped exile. 3 days later, Jack received a reply. It was short and to the point. Meet me at Research Station Alpha in the Centauri system. Come alone. This is your only chance. Jack stared at the message for a long time. Research Station Alpha was deep in military space, far from New Haven. There would be dangerous, and there was no guarantee that Lisa was telling the truth. She might be setting a trap for him, but Jack had no choice. The Harbingers were only days away from Earth. If he was going to save humanity, he had to take the risk. Jack began planning his escape from New Haven. He would need a ship, supplies, and a way to get past military checkpoints. It would be the most dangerous journey of his life. But as he looked out his window at the mining operations and the gray landscape of New Haven, Jack knew he had to try. He had been called a traitor for protecting alien life. Now he would risk everything to save human life. The irony was not lost on him. The man who had been exiled for caring too much about aliens was now humanity's last hope for survival. Jack Morrison crouched behind a stack of supply crates in the New Haven spaceport. The facility was busier than he had ever seen it, with refugee ships arriving every few hours. Families with frightened children and whatever belongings they could carry streamed off the transports. The Harbingers were getting closer, and people were running out of places to hide. Jack watched as a small cargo ship landed on Pad 7. The pilot was a rough-looking man named Pete Wilson, who smuggled supplies between the outer colonies. Jack had been watching him for 3 days, waiting for the right moment. When Pete walked into the spaceport bar, Jack followed him. The bar was crowded with refugees and miners, all talking about the war. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of cheap alcohol. Jack sat down next to Pete at the bar. I need passage to the Centauri system. Pete looked at him with bloodshot eyes. You're that scientist, aren't you? The one they call a traitor. I am. But I have money, and you need passengers. Pete laughed bitterly. Money won't do me any good if those Harbinger things kill us all. The Centauri system is crawling with military ships. They're not letting anyone through. I can pay you 10,000 credits, Jack said quietly. Pete's eyes widened. That was more money than most cargo pilots made in a year. What's so important that you're willing to pay that much? I might be able to stop the Harbingers. Pete studied Jack's face for a long moment. You're serious, aren't you? Dead serious. All right, we leave in 2 hours. But if we get caught, I'm telling them you forced me to take you. Jack nodded. Fair enough. The journey to Research Station Alpha took 5 days. Pete's ship was old and slow, but it was also small enough to avoid detection by military patrols. They flew through asteroid fields and used old mining routes that were not on official star charts during the journey. Jack studied the news reports about the war. The situation was getting worse every day. The Harbingers had destroyed 6 more colonies and were now only 3 jumps away from Earth. The military had pulled back all their ships to defend the home system. But everyone knew it would not be enough. General Kane appeared on the news every day, promising victory and calling for more volunteers to join the fight, but Jack could see the fear in her eyes. She knew humanity was losing. Research Station Alpha was a small facility built into an asteroid near the edge of the Centauri system. It had been used for weapons research during the early years of human expansion, but most of it had been abandoned when the military moved their operations closer to Earth. Pete's ship docked at the station's single landing bay. Jack gathered his belongings and prepared to leave. Good luck, Pete said as Jack walked toward the airlock. I hope you know what you're doing. So do I, Jack replied. The station's corridors were dimly lit and mostly empty. Jack's footsteps echoed off the metal walls as he made his way to the central laboratory. He had been here once before, years ago, when he was still a respected member of the scientific community. He found Lisa Grant waiting for him in the main lab. She looked older than he remembered, with lines around her eyes and gray streaks in her dark hair. She was not alone. 2 military officers stood beside her, their hands resting on their weapons. Hello, Jack, Lisa said. Her voice was cold and distant. Lisa, thank you for agreeing to meet me. Don't thank me yet. These gentlemen are here to make sure you don't try anything stupid. She gestured to the officers. Major Tony Harris and, Captain Bill Rogers. They're with military intelligence. Jack looked at the officers. They were both young and serious, the kind of men who followed orders without question. I'm not here to cause trouble, Jack said. I'm here to help. Help? Lisa laughed bitterly. You had your chance to help 3 years ago. Instead, you chose to protect aliens over your own species. I chose to protect a peaceful species from being turned into weapons, Jack replied. And now that decision might be the only thing that can save us. Lisa's expression softened slightly. Explain. Jack set down his bag and pulled out his research files. The Harbingers are not just random alien attackers. They're ancient guardians, programmed to eliminate aggressive species that threaten the galaxy. The Zephyrians fought them thousands of years ago and barely survived. How do you know this? The Zephyrians told me. They shared their history with me before I was exiled. They warned me about the Harbingers, but I didn't understand at the time. Major Harris stepped forward. Even if that's true, what good does it do us? We're already at war with these things. That's exactly the problem, Jack said. Fighting them only makes them stronger. They adapt to every weapon we use. They learn our tactics faster than we can develop new ones. The only way to survive is to show them that we're not a threat. And how do we do that? Lisa asked. Jack opened his research files and showed them the Zephyrian records. The Zephyrians survived by changing themselves. They gave up their weapons and learned to work with energy instead of against it. They became living bridges between different forms of life. You're talking about biological modification, Captain Rogers said with disgust. Turning humans into something else. Not turning us into something else, Jack corrected. Helping us become something more. The Zephyrians discovered that life is not about competition and conflict. It's about cooperation and harmony. Lisa studied the files carefully. As a scientist, she could see the implications of what Jack was suggesting. You're proposing some kind of symbiosis between humans and Zephyrian biology? Exactly. Someone would need to undergo the process to become a living translator between human and Harbinger consciousness. They could negotiate with the Harbingers, convince them that humanity can evolve beyond its aggressive nature. That's insane, Major Harris said. You're talking about creating some kind of human-alien hybrid. I'm talking about saving our species, Jack replied. The alternative is extinction. Lisa walked to the window and stared out at the stars. In the distance, they could see the glow of Earth's sun. Even if this is possible, the risks would be enormous. The volunteer might not survive the process. And even if they did, they would be permanently changed. I know, Jack said quietly. That's why I'll do it myself. Lisa turned around. What? I'll undergo the symbiosis process. I already have more knowledge of Zephyrian biology than anyone else. I'm the logical choice. You're volunteering to become a test subject for an untested procedure that will probably kill you? Jack nodded. If it works, I might be able to save humanity. If it doesn't, you're no worse off than you are now. Major Harris spoke into his radio. Base, this is Harris. We need to speak with General Kane immediately. 20 minutes later, General Kane's face appeared on the laboratory's main screen. She looked tired and stressed, but her eyes were still hard as steel. Dr. Morrison, she said. I'm told you have a proposal for stopping the Harbingers. Jack explained his plan again, showing the Zephyrian records and explaining the symbiosis process. General Kane listened without interruption, her expression growing more skeptical with each word. Let me understand this correctly, she said when Jack finished. You want us to trust the survival of humanity to an untested procedure based on alien records that may or may not be accurate. General, with respect, your current strategy isn't working. The Harbingers are 3 days away from Earth. How many more ships are you willing to sacrifice? General Kane's jaw tightened. Every ship we have, if necessary. And what happens when they're all gone? What happens when the Harbingers reach Earth? The general was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. Dr. Grant, in your professional opinion, is this procedure even possible? Lisa looked at Jack, then at the research files. It's theoretically possible. The Zephyrians do have the ability to manipulate biological energy, and Dr. Morrison has more knowledge of their biology than anyone else. What are the chances of success? Unknown, maybe 10%, maybe 50%. There's no way to know without trying. General Kane closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. The Council will never approve this. They'll say it's too dangerous, too risky. Then don't tell them, Jack said. General, you have the authority to authorize emergency research. You can say it's a new weapon system. And if you die, then you court-martial me posthumously for treason. Either way, I won't be around to care. Ben Clark's voice came through the communication system. General, this is Administrator Clark on New Haven. I've been listening to this conversation. For what it's worth, I think Morrison is telling the truth. I've watched him work for 2 years. He's not a coward or a traitor. He's just a man who believes in doing the right thing. General Kane looked surprised. Administrator Clark, you're supposed to be supervising Dr. Morrison's exile. I am, ma'am. And I'm telling you that if anyone can pull off this crazy plan, it's him. The general was quiet for another long moment. Finally, she made her decision. Dr. Grant, you have 72 hours to prepare for the procedure. Dr. Morrison. God help us all, you have permission to proceed. But if this fails, if you die for nothing, I will personally make sure history remembers you as the man who wasted humanity's last chance. Jack felt a mixture of relief and terror. Thank you, General. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you save the world. The communication ended, leaving Jack alone with Lisa and the two officers. Jack Morrison lay on the medical table as Lisa Grant made final preparations for the procedure. The laboratory at Research Station Alpha had been transformed into a makeshift surgical theater. Machines hummed around him, monitoring his vital signs and preparing to inject the Zephyrian crystals into his bloodstream. "Are you ready?" Lisa asked. Her hands shook slightly as she held the injection device. Jack looked at the crystalline material floating in the clear fluid. It glowed with a soft blue light like captured starlight. These were fragments of actual Zephyrian beings who had volunteered to help save humanity. They had traveled across space in secret, brought by allies who still believed in Jack's vision of peace. "I'm ready," Jack said. Lisa injected the fluid into his arm. At first Jack felt nothing. Then a warm sensation spread through his body, followed by pain unlike anything he had ever experienced. It felt like his cells were being torn apart and rebuilt from the inside out. The crystals began to bond with his nervous system, creating new pathways between his brain and the energy fields that surrounded all living things. Jack could feel his consciousness expanding, reaching out beyond the boundaries of his physical body. "Heart rate is spiking," Major Harris reported from the monitoring station. "Blood pressure is critical. Stay with us, Jack," Lisa said. "Fight through it." Jack gritted his teeth as waves of agony washed over him. But underneath the pain, he could feel something extraordinary happening. He was becoming connected to the vast network of energy that flowed through the universe. He could sense the thoughts and emotions of every living being within miles of the station. Suddenly, the pain stopped. Jack opened his eyes and saw the world in a completely new way. Colors were brighter and more complex. He could see energy patterns flowing through the air like rivers of light. Most amazing of all, he could feel the presence of the Zephyrians. In his mind, their ancient wisdom now part of his own consciousness. "Jack, can you hear me?" Lisa asked. "I can hear everything," Jack replied. His voice sounded different, deeper, and more resonant. "Lisa, it worked. I can feel them. The Harbingers are close." Through his enhanced senses, Jack could perceive the approaching alien fleet. They were massive beings of crystallized energy and quantum metal, existing partially in normal space and partially in dimensions beyond human understanding. They were not evil, but they were ancient and powerful, and they saw humanity as a threat that needed to be eliminated. "How long do we have?" Major Harris asked. "Hours," Jack said. "They'll reach Earth by tomorrow morning." General Kane's voice came through the communication system. "Dr. Morrison, our long-range sensors confirm your assessment. The Harbinger fleet has been detected at the edge of the solar system. Can you make contact with them?" Jack closed his eyes and reached out with his new abilities. His consciousness traveled across space at the speed of thought, touching the edge of the Harbinger collective mind. What he found there was not hatred or malice, but a cold determination to preserve the balance of life in the galaxy. "I can reach them," Jack said. "But I need to be closer. I need to be in space, between them and Earth." "That's suicide," Captain Rogers said. "The moment you leave this station, you'll be in the middle of a war zone. It's the only way," Jack replied. "The Harbingers need to see that humanity can change. They need to witness the transformation firsthand." Lisa looked at the monitoring equipment. "Jack, your biological readings are off the charts. The symbiosis is still ongoing. Your body is adapting to the Zephyrian integration, but we don't know what the long-term effects will be." "There might not be a long-term," Jack said quietly. "But if this works, it will be worth it." 2 hours later, Jack stood in the docking bay of Research Station Alpha, preparing to board a small transport ship. His appearance had changed dramatically during the procedure. His skin had taken on a slight luminescent quality, and his eyes now glowed with the same blue light as the Zephyrian crystals. He was no longer entirely human, but he was not entirely alien either. He was something new. Lisa hugged him goodbye. "I'm sorry for what I said at the tribunal. I should have supported you." "You were protecting your career," Jack said. "I understand. No, I was being a coward." "You were right to protect the Zephyrians. You were right about everything." Jack smiled. "Take care of yourself, Lisa, and take care of Earth." The transport ship carried Jack toward the inner solar system, where the Earth Defense Fleet was making its final stand. Hundreds of human ships formed defensive lines around Earth and Mars, their weapons powered and ready for battle. Admiral Frank Cooper, the fleet commander, contacted Jack as his ship approached. The front lines. Dr. Morrison, what's your status? I'm ready to make contact with the Harbingers, Jack replied. But I need you to pull back your ships. Any sign of aggression will ruin our chances. I can't do that. My orders are to defend Earth at all costs. Admiral, your ships can't hurt the Harbingers. They've already proven that. The only weapon we have is diplomacy. There was a long pause. All ships, this is Admiral Cooper. Fall back to defensive positions around Earth. Do not engage the enemy unless directly attacked. Jack's transport ship moved past the human fleet and into open space. Through his enhanced senses, he could feel the Harbingers approaching. They were enormous beings, each one the size of a city, moving through space like living mountains of metal and energy. As they drew closer, Jack opened his mind and sent out a peaceful greeting in the Zephyrian language. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The Harbinger collective consciousness pressed against his mind like a vast ocean, ancient and powerful beyond imagination. Why do you speak the old tongue, small one? The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, a chorus of beings that had existed since the dawn of time. Because I have learned from those who came before, Jack replied. I am here to speak for my species. Your species is aggressive and warlike. You spread through space like a plague, consuming and destroying. You must be stopped. We can change. Jack said, we can learn to live in harmony with other forms of life. I am proof of that change. The Harbingers examined Jack's transformed biology with senses that could perceive the quantum structure of his cells. They saw the Zephyrian integration and the new pathways it had created in his consciousness. You have bonded with the crystal. Singers, one of them observed. You have chosen symbiosis over domination? Yes, and others can do the same. Humanity is young and sometimes foolish, but we are capable of growth. We are capable of becoming more than we are. The Harbinger fleet stopped its advance. For several minutes, they communicated among themselves in frequencies that Jack could barely perceive. Finally, their leader spoke again. Show us, it said. Show us that your species can evolve beyond its nature. Jack reached out to the human fleet with his transformed consciousness. He could feel the fear and anger of the human soldiers, their desire to fight and die for their world. But he could also feel their love for their families, their hope for the future, their capacity for compassion and sacrifice. Admiral Cooper, Jack said over the communication channel. I need every ship in the fleet to lower their shields and power down their weapons. Are you insane? The Admiral replied. That would leave us completely defenseless. It would show the Harbingers that we trust them, that we choose peace over war. I can't order my people to commit suicide. You're not ordering them to die, you're ordering them to live, to become part of something larger than themselves. Jack broadcast his consciousness across the entire fleet, sharing his experience with the Zephyrian symbiosis. He showed them what it felt like to be connected to all life, to understand that cooperation was stronger than conflict. One by one, the human ships began to lower their shields. It started with a single frigate, then spread to others as the crews felt Jack's influence. Within minutes, the entire fleet had powered down their weapons and opened themselves to the Harbingers. The ancient beings moved closer, examining the human ships with sensors that could read the intentions of every person. Aboard, they found fear, but they also found courage. They found anger, but they also found love. Most importantly, they found the willingness to change. Your species has potential, the Harbinger leader finally said. We will spare your world. But you must prove that this transformation is real. You must learn to work with other species, not dominate them. You must become gardeners of life, not destroyers. We will, Jack promised. We will learn from our mistakes and become better than we were. The Harbinger fleet began to withdraw, fading back into the dimensions beyond normal space. As they departed, their leader spoke one final message. Remember this day, transformed one. Remember what your species almost lost and what it chose to become instead. Jack felt his consciousness returning to his physical body as the Harbingers disappeared. The symbiosis process was complete and he was forever changed. He would never again be fully human, but he had become something that humanity needed. A bridge between species. A translator between different forms of life. General Kane's voice came through the communication system, filled with awe and relief. Dr. Morrison, the Harbingers are withdrawing. Our sensors show them leaving the solar system. It's over, Jack said. Humanity has been given a second chance.